Okay. Okay, good evening. My name is Christian Kinkombe. I represent the Swiss Impact Investing Association in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, known as SIIA Romandie. The annual UN Climate Change Conference, or known as COP26, served as a meeting of the parties of the Paris Agreement, was held in Glasgow, Scotland, from the 31st of October to the 12th of November. It wasn't all gloom, because outside of the negotiation halls, leaders agreed on a broader package signaling change. In fact, both government and non-state actors stepped up on key challenges together. Today's event introduces the audience to two leading non-state practitioners, which my colleague Derek will introduce you to after my introduction. The agenda is therefore structured as follows. After Derek's introduction to the program, part one of the core program will give our two main speakers an opportunity to share with the audience a number of compelling reasons for businesses and investors to pursue social and environmental impact and engage with the SDGs and a new Glasgow Climate Pact based on their past and present experience within the tech industries. This will then be followed by part two, where Derek will ask them a series of questions. There will then be an opportunity for a short exchange with the attendees. We will kindly ask the attendees to briefly introduce themselves by name and affiliation and keep the questions short. And the event will end with a few concluding remarks regarding the next SIIA event and how to become a member of the Swiss Impact Investing Association. So the house rules are, please turn off your microphones. We're not speaking in order not to disturb the other listeners. This event will be recorded for the purpose of further outreach of the ideas being exchanged today. Okay, so I put it up here so people can see. Okay. So the Swiss Impact Investing Association webinar series are going to refer to the term sustainable investment as any investment approach integrating environmental, social, and corporate governance factors into the selection and management of investment. There are 8 different forms of sustainable investments. The last one is impact investing. This figure presents a classification of these 8 approaches. All approaches can be categorized according to their sustainability focus or intended effect. However, impact investing is the only category that demonstrates measurable impact. Hence, this is the main reason why we at the Swiss Impact Investing Association only focuses on impact investing and not on these other sustainable investment categories. Based on the Global Impact Investing Network's annual Impact Investor Survey, there is around $715 billion of asset under management known as impact investing, and more than 60% are invested through listed asset strategies. The rest are invested through private asset strategies, and of those 60% are invested in emerging and frontier market. This is what is considered as development finance, being both a subsection of sustainable finance in the sense of integrating ESG norms into investment value chain, and impact investing in the sense of positively addressing the SDGs. In comparison, the impact investing and its development finance investment form only a small fraction of the global capital markets. They nevertheless enjoy very strong backwinds and attractions among asset management and wealth management operators, as we have seen in the last few years here in Geneva and in Switzerland overall. So how to position the Swiss Impact Investing Association among the other players on the market? So SIIA is an integral part of the, let's say, the global impact investing movement. We work closely with market enablers, particularly impact hubs, accelerators in Switzerland and beyond. And we look at the full impact value chain, not just as the suppliers of impact capital. And we seek to optimize the cross-fertilization between the two linguistics areas of Switzerland. And finally, we endeavor to bring together the tech revolution and the impact revolution as a special theme of this webinar series. Our vision are that we are the global leading network of impact investing and aim to establish Switzerland as the epicenter. Our mission statement is that the Swiss Impact Investing Association encourages all stakeholders to jointly develop a narrative for impact investing for society to adopt by being a platform for best practices of impact investing. SIIA is also an influential private cross-sector driven coalition dedicated to driving more private capital to improve lives and the environment. SIIA's collaboration is collaborating with Swiss diplomatic representations, and SIIA is also inherently diversified, giving the ecosystem it represents, thus providing the ground knowledge about investment policy and state of intermediation. And finally, SIIA is a user of the Chamomile platform, which provides an unmatched demand side and supply side connections. And with these words, I hand over to my colleague, Derek Kaiser, the Stockalber, who will introduce the rest of the program. Over to you, Derek.
Christian, thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for those introductory remarks. Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our first SIIA Romandie online webinar. To really focus actually on the ecosystem itself. What we're trying to achieve here in, let's say, this type of webinar is really to bring together what we call impact connectors. It's people who can really make a difference in the impact space. And these can include startups, investors, scientists, politicians, philanthropists. And the idea is really to craft a more inclusive and sustainable world through innovation, finance, or technology. And today it's actually two of those dimensions that we're going to look at. Why Romandie and Geneva? Because we feel that it's a unique ecosystem where world-leading academic centers, large banking actors, action-oriented foundations, multilateral organizations come together. And there are silos, and we aim actually to cut through them in order to accelerate the response to the 2030 SDGs and the 2050 net zero goals. So today we are fortunate to have actually two very experienced impact connectors with careers in the startup scale-up, technology and venture capital spaces. First, we have Isabel Andrei, who is the author of the book Tech It Green, Building the Tech and Sustainable Revolution, and the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Asat Ghana, a climate venture build and seed fund. As a background, Isabel has worked at the EU Commission and at major financial institutions such as AXA and Société Générale. She became the Vice President of Innovation for Digital Reunion and the founding managing director of Girls in Tech, Indian Ocean chapter. She is also a board member of the French Tech Reunion. She has been speaking at various TEDx, UN and HSC Paris events, as well as contributed as an expert to the Green Tech Task Force of the European Champions Alliance. So welcome, Isabel.
Thanks for having me.
Our second panelist is Wei Meng Tu, who is a partner of the VC firm Leonie Hill Capital and CIO at the Invisible Heart Impact Fund. Wei Meng manages a single family office VC&P investment focused on the convergence of deep tech and sustainability in the telecom, mobility, fintech, healthcare, and energy spaces. He's also a blockchain and crypto advocate, sitting on the board of the Swiss Asia Crypto Alliance. And before becoming an investor, Wei Meng had extensive leadership roles with Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, Qatar Telecom, and NEC in their data center and cloud services infrastructure businesses. We have also today a wide variety of actors joining us, and I want to welcome them. And we really want this session to be interactive. So please introduce yourself and let us know your thoughts in the chat section. We will then actually gather the questions and let some of you, of course, interact with us. We're looking forward to it. So today, what are we looking at? We're looking at the post-COP26. Is it an opportunity to accelerate impact through private sector technology and capital? And we wanted also to have real examples. So why post-COP26? Because as Christian mentioned, there is actually a lukewarm sentiment after the meetings. Actually, on the state agreement level, there has been a letdown, but there are some very positive dynamics emerging, coming mostly from the private sector, who's driving public-private coalitions and addressing key subjects, such as the 1.5 degree gap we have still today, the fact that developed countries should help climate vulnerable countries to adapt, curb methane emissions, halt reverse forest losses, align the financial sector to the net zero goals, remove internal combustion engine, accelerate the phase out of coal, and the financing of fossil fuels. So although the rules have not been set in stone, there are strong coalitions emerging from the private sector and the public sector addressing these. So we wanted really actually to ask our panelists today, actually whether the responsibilities of the net zero have shifted from governments to the private sector in a post-COP26 world. So maybe Isabel, you want to start?
Thank you. So indeed, I think we all faced some unfulfillment or disappointment feeling towards governments. And frankly, G20 a few days before was also disappointing. And interestingly enough, the two high-level champions of COP26, Gonzalo and Nigel, invited the corporate and finance industry to participate in the implementation of the global net zero agenda. And this was a first. And truly, this is where the private sector steps in. We can no longer wait for our political leaders to solve climate change. We all need to commit, not only as consumers and citizens, but really as professionals, and especially in the private sector. And I think this is indeed one of the main takeaways. So one of the good news of this COP26 is obviously the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero announcement. So that means that banks and asset managers representing 40% of all the world financial assets, I think it's about 450 firms in the world, committed to invest 130 trillions of private capital to reach net zero and to finance the transition. So this is under the lead of Mark Carney. Of course, some skepticism has been raised, and the French nonprofit Reclaim Finance underlined that the alliance was not requiring signatories to stop financing fossil fuels. Some other, like the UN General Secretary himself, said that there were many announcements, many net zero targets, but that we were lacking some alignments on the metrics. So I think definitely it's a shared responsibility. I wouldn't say it's totally shifting, but it's up now to the private sector to clearly take action. We need to standardize. And I think the EU taxonomy and the SFDR that goes with it is in that sense very interesting, and we will see this in the coming months, because it will require companies to regularly disclose a large amount of data, so that it could lead to data standardization, and it could avoid that greenwashing skepticism. So yes, we need to take action ourselves. And I would say to be as demanding with our sector as we are towards political leaders.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. And I think I really agree with you that at the end, actually having a common language, transparency, traceability will be a way to, let's say, have a common framework, identify risks. And by identifying risks, we can also then build new types of financial instruments and ways to maybe allocate capital and manage those risks. And that's something we'll definitely look at, let's say.
We would be able to compare it to.
Exactly. And so women would be very interesting to have also your view, because you come actually from the venture capital side. So it's kind of the bottom up, creating innovation, financing innovation, and really actually looking at the outcome focused, let's say, technologies, business models, and others. So do you see actually a COP26 as an opportunity to accelerate, let's say, the approach you're undertaking, or maybe you have a different views?
Well, first of all, thanks, SIIA, for having me this evening. Well, I just think that COP26 is just a showcase. Like we walk into any exhibition hall, all these big news happening, top down, the public sector, from a government perspective, that's good. It's progressive for them to at least speak out and put some pledge and commitment around that. But I think it's still far away. It's too far away for us to attain this goal. In my opinion, the private sector has been very, very neglected in that discussion, because if you notice, all these publicly listed companies are pretty much in the limelight. They talk about the major companies, especially in the energy sectors. There's good stuff that they have come in, talk about the strategy, talk about the blueprint. I think that's good. But every one of us, we know how urgent we are in this situation. And the issue here is that being a venture capitalist, we are long enough to understand that big companies cannot innovate. So while they have this big picture, they've got a blueprint, they will still need to have the innovation as the heart of creating technological advancements to accelerate from the traditional assets into a hybrid and eventually into a full energy efficient asset. So this is going to be a long way. And second observation that I have for the past 2 weeks, because we invested into funds as a single family office. I've got more emails coming from VC capital and private equity trying to use COP26 as a statement to arouse interest to get investment into the funds. Okay, and I think this is good. This is very good momentum. But at the end of the day, I'm worried that the issue is in greenwashing. Tell me which new investing thesis has nothing to do with ESG. Everybody wants to deal with ESG. So that the real fact here is that this ESG is become, and impact investing has become a buzzword. But if you look at the underlying project in the innovation space, startups are still not getting enough funding as fast as they deserve to. And the asset management industry is moving into creating ETF fund, green bonds, and trying to bring all these equity market, packaging them and trying to raise funds. And I'm sorry to say that majority of the market is moving into this trend. So I think the innovation that I'm expecting is still not as quick and as well received at the real implementation situation. And therefore, the reason why we have set up a Invisible Heart Venture Fund is all because we want to create impact to the venture capital industry. I think a lot of the VC today understand how to identify good disruptive technology, but the issue is that they have not enough skill set to guide them, mentor them, and convert the capital investing into those startup company to become an impact enterprise. So I think whether you are in the robotic space, you're in the AI space, or even you are just a fintech guy, I think all of us needs to re-look at how to build a mission statement in the company to create this whole ESG mission. And back to the COP26, I hope the next time when there is a major meeting, there should be a lot of innovation stories and use case. There has to be a lot of pension funds, a lot of major institution funds coming up to pledge for innovation. And this is something we miss in the current situation where the big boys are still throwing money to the bigger companies, but the innovative companies, in my opinion, is very much neglected. So for that, I'm concerned, but the good news is there are already movement in this space. So let's hope we can use a platform like SIIA to do more education into the innovation space, because we are all impact agents. And I think we need to lead this process, this know-how into the venture capital industry to help them convert more technological disruption that can create direct positive impact to the climate change issue.
What's really interesting, Wei-Meng, and I think from what I hear from what you're saying is that actually COP26 was really focused on the demand side and less on the supply side of solution for impact. And maybe one thing to clarify, ESG, let's say, is a way for publicly traded companies to share their good behavior, while impact is really about outcome-focused solutions addressing, let's say, non-existing markets, but those markets are being created by regulatory environments or a new narrative, which is, I think, what COP26 is trying to achieve. And if we look at it this way, I think what we need to focus on, and that's what I hear from what you just said, is find actually supply of solutions. And those solutions have to be created from scratch. And this is where incubation environment, this is where venture capitalists, this is where actually risk management and narrative are so important actually to drive forward. And this is actually what SIIA is also trying to do by bringing together connectors of people who are in the front line. So it can be VCs, can be incubation, it can be politicians, it can be scientists, but really people who are on this outcome focused and less on this, I would say, ESG focused, which is very important because we need to create a demand, but we are focusing on the supply. So to move on the supply, I think, Isabel, I wanted to have a view because you have a great experience in Asia and also on the incubation side of new solutions, especially in climate tech. And I was wondering if you could maybe, let's say, share with us maybe your views of which markets are emerging where maybe new technologies or business models could have an impact. So it's not theoretical or conceptual, but it's really, look, there is the regulatory environment, there are clients, but there are no solutions meeting those. So have you maybe some examples to share with us? Oh, you have actually your sound.
Yes. So I was first willing to reflect on what Wei-Meng just said, because I can only agree on that. I think we all agree today in the industry that ESG has become a buzzword, and somehow it was more about ticking boxes, like getting into, and some investors would testimony that they would get into the investment committee and just tick the right boxes to make it pass. But now today, I think this skepticity towards ESG, but also some labels, make us shift from responsible finance, which is based on these ESG assessments, to impact investing, as you said. And very interestingly, I think, for example, in the EU taxonomy, you have to assess the principal adverse impact. You have to really measure and disclose and make sure that you do not harm. And somehow I think it's really interesting to also measure negative externality to just ban them. And this said, I think this brings a lot of new players that are stepping in. Of course, VC funds are blooming in Europe currently. And the time, you said you had a lot of demands. If you look at the figures, the time for a climate fund to close this year is about 1 year, which is 5 months less than the industry average. So there's a growing interest. And among the disruptive players, because you were talking about new business models, just within the finance industry, you have new actors and players such as Time for the Planet in France, which is a public crowd-funded fund. So it's open to everyone. You can become a partner for 10 euros. You have about, I think it's 35,000 people today who have invested. The technologies are open sourced. They're setting up a climate dividend, and you have a lot of people who work for this, analyzing cases, analyzing technologies, this all for free. So this is within the finance area, something very new. And I think our industry is also shifting with a new generation that is really demanding, that is not willing anymore just to take the boxes of ESGs. In terms of sectors, of course, we could talk about regenerative agriculture and EV, but one sector I think is very interesting for the coming years is nature-based solutions, because it's about conservation of forests, mangroves, wetlands. It doesn't look like innovation. It may be disappointing, but in fact, nature-based solutions bring an answer to climate mitigation through emissions reduction, CO2 removal. It's part of climate adaptation. You can bring some local social impact, and it's definitely critical for biodiversity loss. And these are, because they are not in the innovation sphere, usually not sufficiently funded, because it's less than 2% of the global climate change mitigation finance today. But the fact is they make up more than a third of the climate solutions that we would need. So there's clearly a gap and an opportunity here. And the funding gap for these nature-based solutions is about $700 billion every year. So we talked about innovation. I'm a lot in the innovation field, but somehow I think they are already today some solutions. We do not need to run into future technologies investments where we don't know yet if it will be efficient, because we don't have that time, whereas we have already available solutions and they are looking for smart investors. And again, if you look at this deforestation pledge decided at COP26, I think there's a subject about how we value positive impacts. I mean, it costs, you get more value from cutting trees in Amazonia than from protecting them. And I think if there is an innovation here, it's not only in technologies, it's in finding the way to fix this and to give more value on our markets to positive impacts rather than to negative impacts. And then I could tell you a lot about climate tech and electricity, but really this is something I was willing to emphasize.
I think it was very interesting, because actually another idea linked to natural capital is what we call natural infrastructures, meaning we can use forests, we can use mangroves to address key negative externalities and define them as infrastructures around cities or whatever, let's say, activities the human have. And the second point I want to make is innovation lies also in the way we measure and we handle data. And that's where I wanted to rebound actually with WeMeng, because actually what you described, which is natural capital-based solutions, need to be measured. And we are in a space where we can start measuring it, not in a statistical way, but let's say in a scientific way, through satellites or let's say on the ground sensors and everything. And these can then be extracted into decentralized networks like blockchain and other type of things, which could be then the input to maybe new financial solutions that could actually identify and define the trade-off you just described, Isabel. So I want to go back to WeMeng, and maybe as you have that experience in, let's say, blockchain, which is the infrastructure under cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, which is this decentralized ledger architecture, I was wondering, is it actually a dimension you bring into sustainability when you actually look at your investments?
Well, that's a good point. And definitely data is the asset that we think is going to be the new enabling factor. I think the government is still continuing to create energy transition infrastructure. I think all these mega infrastructure will be pretty much contributed by government related projects, and typically there will be a lot of participation coming from the public listed company. I think from a innovative company, what it requires to do is to create the data infrastructure. And I think the data infrastructure today, if you look at from the upstream to the downstream, there are many moving parts. And a lot of companies are trying to address it in a very silo approach. And because this is a silo approach, this is a company strategy. I think we need to call to action to identify problem statement and create it as a value chain project. This is very important. Like what we are facing now with inflation, with COVID, look at all these supply chains, they're all in the breakdown. And that's why Christmas this year in Europe, for people who is going to spend money on gifting, is going to be very, very heady. You don't have enough stocks on hand to give it to your loved ones. So it's the same that is applying to the infrastructure issue today, where there's so many of the money pours into renewables, trying to create the energy efficiency, but at the downstream level, how that can transit to incentivize people to even create, more partnership collaboration among the stakeholders. And data needs to be in that core backbone to enable all this entire ecosystem. And back to your blockchain, the crypto aspect, I think, in my opinion, crypto may be a bit far in the next 12 months that I see, but we are still expecting some smart startups will be able to come in and really create a very realistic, pragmatic solution. But blockchain infrastructure as a whole, I think, is here to stay. And I think it can accelerate the whole pace of the entire value chain management. So, for instance, one example, we are looking at, creating some AI on a blockchain infrastructure for EV charging infrastructure. So today, if you drive an EV, everybody will know that you just do a GPS search. There is stations and all these things, but I'm an EV driver. The issue is that these whole stations, the information are not updated. Means that when you drive at 10% availability into a station, you realize that the station has been taken up, and a lot of people hop at the parking space, even though their charge has been completed. That affects the whole, backlog of people who is requiring that. So I think the information has to be into a collaborative platform to provide more smart management of users. And this is very important, that the big companies may not have enough of this agility to create this sort of data infrastructure. But I would think that for innovative companies, especially startups, will be in a very good position to create this sort of data infrastructure.
Yeah, I think what is very interesting is actually we increasingly live in a complex networks, or let's say ecosystems, which need to be dynamic, and data will be driving a lot of those decisions. And of course, trust and governance will become important. So let's say technology like blockchain could maybe address part of it on the trust side. Of course, it depends on the input for the output, but at least, let's say, when it's in the pipe, let's say you have a control of it. And then other governance, you can have this decentralized approach, but at one point you need to infuse trust in those data. So I think that's also a key point of actually how to then actually build, let's say, new solutions. And just to make an example, Isabel, you mentioned that we need to shift behavior, and you've worked a lot on the behavioral aspect of, let's say, the transition to green. You could think of micro incentives, which could maybe help people to, let's say, be, pushed, or let's say, driven in a certain direction in a very transparent way. But let's say, at least there could be a very, let's say, direct feedback, the nudging, as people call it. And there's a Nobel Prize. We recently actually won the prize for that concept. But I think it would be interesting now, maybe Isabel, to bring maybe the more human dimension, let's say, of all that challenge. Because at the end, we are humans, and we need to, let's say, find a way to live in a symbiotic manner with nature. We found that new rules emerging. We found that traditional capital is moving in that direction, with its greenwashing and real projects. We are new technologies, but at the end, it's also very much linked to behavior. And I was wondering, actually, if you could maybe, let's say, share with us the missing pieces, let's say, of the puzzle. We've discussed the financial side, the technology side, maybe the human side, or maybe some others Legos are missing. And it would be very interested to actually have your views on that.
Thank you. It's a very interesting and tricky question. I would say there are two things, two pieces of answer. And the key word would be inclusion and diversity to me. That is to say, on one hand, setting up a more inclusive governance in terms of diversity, minorities, a strong gender lens, because this impacts the decisions we made in terms of investment. And second, obviously, is about the way you share the value and incentivize people in the finance industry, that is to say, compensation and carried interest mainly. So as per diversity, I think it was very interesting to see the contrast at this COP26 with climate leaders, where by far, at least in the media, women, Greta Thunberg, some young female activists from indigenous people, the speech of Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, which had a high impact, and to some extent the voice of the Swiss Environmental Minister also. So that on one hand you have this civil society with a very strong voice, and on the other hand, at the negotiation table, well, women and minority, women are underrepresented. And it's the same in the finance, well, I would say in the funding industry. When you fund startups and look at the figures, it's very, well, figures speak for themselves. So female-led entrepreneurs are usually underrepresented. So maybe one example to make it more concrete of how we try on a daily basis to do this on our side, to walk the talk. Just Sadhgana means virtuous tribe. So it's a huge responsibility, because we try to make things differently, not only to invest in climate startups, but also to change the model from the inside and to start with ourselves. You will say if we make it or if we fail, but at least we are trying to inspire and push the needle. So in terms of governance and gender, of course, we have appointed a chairwoman, and we have been told we wouldn't find one, it would not be a quality person, and we have a wonderful person. We have very diverse backgrounds. We have people from, we have actually, well, people from crisis countries. We have more than half of the board members our women, same at C-level, investment committee. We have in our investment committee people from the South, the global South. So it's really not a pale male. I'm sorry to say that, because it's really not a criticism from my side, but well, it's very balanced, and we try to make our decisions this way. And on the compensation aspect, we are setting up an inclusive carried interest model, and it's inspired from the slicing pie model you may know. It means that every risk you take, every contribution someone brings to the table in the team is valued. That means that if you're a marketing person, if you're a communication person, you will receive your share of the carried interest because you have contributed. And it's not the GP having it all at the end of the day. It's sharing the value everyone brings to the table. And it's changing the whole mood within the company too, because it's a shared project. You said before that it was not only bringing money, we are a venture builder. So what we try to do is to avoid greenwashing by building a impact by design company. So from the very beginning, we start to work on the governance. As said, is compensation fair? Are you really having a business model that will generate positive and not negative externalities? So we try to build this from the very start, and to be on the entrepreneur side to build this. And then the last thing we do is we are 100% remote and distributed. That is to say that we promote and try to raise talents wherever they are. If you have the value, but you're in Joburg, it's not an issue. You can be part of the adventure because we will take you where you live, and it makes us more diverse, and I think that helps us take better investment decisions.
What is interesting, actually, thank you, Isabel and Yimeng, is that actually you both now kind of relocated from, let's say, wherever you were for a couple of years to the region of Geneva, Switzerland, and then from that base became global again. And so I just want to understand actually why you made that decision, and maybe also share with us, you did a little bit, Isabel, but about actually your current projects, actually where they are geographically, so that actually we can visualize that at the end, in the post COP26 and this COVID period, suddenly geography has become fragmented, and maybe doesn't have the same meaning as it had in the past. And that could also create opportunities, as you just described, on the gender, experiences, or whatever, the location of people. And I just want to understand actually how those new types of ecosystems are emerging. And that could be maybe one of the key levers of actually what will happen in post COP26 world, is at the end, let's say, national boundaries won't be as important as finding the right people to work together wherever and whoever they are.
You still have some constraints on the time slots, to be honest. But mainly, well, I was in the Indian Ocean before, working with Mauritius, Madagascar, Comoros, Africa, but also Europe. And the team is spread all over the world, but mainly Africa and Europe. So there's Africa, Berlin, London, Lisbon, Barcelona, Paris, next to Geneva. We have people in Australia, UK, and India, many in India too, and Singapore. As per the portfolio, so we are still growing. Our main company is in Kenya, and the second one is in Europe. So it's we try to have a balanced portfolio from the geographical aspect. Is that answering your question?
Yes, no, it was really actually to have actually that understanding, actually how you kind of rayonner, as one say in French. It's kind of really kind of.
It truly, we have so many people asking to join the adventure or the journey, I think it's about values. And when you talked about human before, human aspects, when we hire someone, we say the person first. We choose people and the expertise, of course, but we train people when required. We first chose someone who was fully committed, fully convinced, and aligned with the values. And I would say it's organic.
Because we may in venture capital, from experience, of course, technology, IP, market are important, but at the end, it's about the team. So again,
Yeah.
people. And I was wondering, maybe Wimeng, if you could share with us maybe why you are now based in Lucerne and in Switzerland, and maybe also actually how you manage those investments and let's say where you stand.
Well, Singapore is a very comfortable place, like in Switzerland. I make a conscious decision to expand our investment footprint, particularly in this part of the world. And I'm here to learn. I'm here to connect, because I think Asia has a large consumer market. Asia has been a fast-growing market, but Asia has not yet achieved what it ought to from a ESG point of view. And it's so important that, coming from Asia, I mean, I've lived in the US, in Silicon Valley, in Middle East, in China, some places. So, but coming here to me is that I wanted to really get connected to create some movement back to Asia. And I think this is all about education. And the most important thing that I would love to impart some of those guidance back to Asia is the culture. And I think culture sets apart when you comes into an economic agenda or really ESG agenda to create impact. So it's not about the hard skill, it's really the soft skill. And the soft skill, in my opinion, needs to be embedded into all entrepreneurs. Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs drive the entire changes in our economy. And that economy will then transit into really the usability. And besides financial, I hope that, we can create the culture of impact enterprises to do something more purposeful in their mission as in their entrepreneurial journey. So this is the reason why I'm in Switzerland, to meet up new friends like all of you. I wanted to learn more, connect more. Like what you say, impact connector is to connect globally.
I think I totally agree. We are here to create those new markets, and you cannot do it alone, or you cannot do it with an old mindset. I think you have to almost to gift, let's say, an opportunity for someone else to rebound and then create actually a common opportunity. And I think those type of new transversal ecosystems are emerging, and technology can help. Look, only tonight, I think actually what SIIA is organizing is a way to bring people with, let's say, common values, and maybe just say, okay, fine, I have a key of your door and vice versa. So there could be opportunities of just sharing those perspectives, and either within a closed, let's say, community or in an open one. And I think that's actually what Christian and I and SIIA are aiming actually to do, is create that platform of openness to really have impact connected people who have those keys and can maybe make a difference. So thank you to the both of you. So I wanted to, I see.
Most welcome.
And I see that there is a question from Licia, and she asked about public-private partnerships. And I think it's kind of a nice way to maybe, let's say, go back to COP26 and say at the end, the state or the regulator is the enabler of the market, and the private sector can then actually innovate. But then there is always this risk component, especially at the beginning, because even venture capitalists will say, look, I cannot deploy my capital, there's too much uncertainty. Blended finance could be an alternative, or maybe, let's say, financial instruments like blue bonds, green bonds, those type, let's say, of solutions, but trying to, let's say, bridge that gap. And I was wondering, whether actually you had some experiences on maybe using public-private dialogue to maybe enable a new market, because actually we need to create those new markets. So we need to find solutions to open them, and then momentum can emerge. But I think that's a key risk. And what is interesting actually from COP26 is there is to be a common narrative. The tools might not be there yet, but only the common narrative actually make us go closer to maybe addressing those gaps. So I was wondering if maybe at the public-private dimension came as an opportunity in your day-to-day activities.
Absolutely. From our point of view, back to the innovation topic, for PPP, we are always seeking to create a sandbox environment. I think this is all about stages. And currently, to create POCs into this environment is always very costly. And the question is, who is going to pay the bill of this whole cost of concept, proof of concept? And we are trying to step up to encourage the regulator to put up not a regulatory a role, but a regulatory plus a impact development role to promote innovations to be into a contained environment, a defined parameters, so that there will be more people willing to step up to create disruption.
Isabel?
Yes, you have development agencies or the European Investment Fund, for example, who are co-invested into an asset management company in the VC locally in Indian Ocean, because there was a lack in risk-taking from local actors because they were kind of risk-averse towards innovation and startups, so that you could these scheme exist, and it's definitely not only for environmental or infrastructure or clean energy projects. You also have some for social investments. So it is existing definitely. Just to revert to what you said before in your question about Geneva, definitely I think Geneva today is the capital of SDGs. Again, it's a kind of buzzword like ESG if you want, but it's definitely the place where you have this energy, and energy is a very important word to me, where you can cross financial sector, impact entrepreneurship, real sustainability expertise, not only from the UN, but also, and research. And I think there are some kind of unique places like this, and this is why we need to create, I would say, cross bridges or overcross the bridges and create a wave, because it's really about this momentum, not staying frustrated, but take the energy from all the expertise of everyone and make a proof of concept. It's working, it brings value, and we can succeed in that all together.
I think really accelerating the scale up and let's say the initial stages of testing new solutions, etc. If you're in an environment with this kind of diverse expertise, it could accelerate and then build bridges to other centers where actually either the markets or the technology or the competencies are. And I think we are definitely at a unique period where actually those bridges can be built. So I think it's quite fascinating. So I think we have still 5 minutes to go. I know that Christian wants to mention a few words. So I wanted to let both of you maybe to kind of wrap up and maybe share a few perspectives you still want to share with the audience. And I wanted to thank you for your energy, enthusiasm, and what you're doing. Because at the end, look, it's one step at a time. This is how we're going to move forward.
Okay, let me start. I think we're all waiting each other. Well, I think the energy is a good point. Isabel put up a very nice word, is energy, because, with human energy, I think there's infinite possibility. And I think I would like to encourage all of us, whether you're in the finance background, research, or you're a consultant, or pretty much you're a banker. We need to come together and constantly, always, like this forum, talk about things and build a common language, so that we can learn what we have learned from each other, from different part of your industry, and bring that common language back to your organization and starts to develop some movement, create some mission around that. I think that will help tremendously.
Thank you. Isabel?
I would say exactly the same. Bring your expertise to the table. We need everyone on board, but be demanding. Be demanding with the company you're working in or you're building. Be demanding with yourself. Measure. I think we are definitely in that age where we cannot just announce. We now need to measure and to bring evidence that we are doing good and not only speaking, because we do not have time anymore.
Action. I think that's really what is needed. But thank you both for this great exchange, and I'll give actually the floor back to Christian.
Thank you.
I think your mic is closed, Christian.
I forgot that we are not in Impact Hub Geneva. So one of the purposes of organizing this event and these activities, of course, also to expand or enlarge our membership. So by joining SIIA, you'll be joining one of the largest global community of investing organizations in Switzerland. This will allow you, as we've done, to shape impact investing efforts in Switzerland, to share knowledge and research and best practices between the Swiss cantons and other countries, as we've done tonight, provide advocacy and policy support, safeguard the integrity of impact investing versus ESG greenwashing, which has been underlined today, identify how impact capital can be used to achieve the SDGs and the new Glasgow Pact, and identify and develop new opportunities for the Global South and enable entrepreneurship, innovation, and capital to deliver impact at scale following best practices. Also, so what we do at SIIA, we mobilize impact investing capital from Switzerland to the emerging market. As you know, more than 1/3 of all impact investment originates from Switzerland going to the emerging markets. And then our flagship event is the SIIA Impact Summit that takes place in Zug. And for the first time, and I'll speak to that in just a moment, we are taking part of the annual Building Bridges event here in Geneva. And then we have two series of monthly webinar series. There's this one we have here where we talk about these different themes. And then we have one where we look at investment opportunities in the Global South. And then it also allows us to collaborate with other members of the Swiss impact investing ecosystem, such as Swiss Sustainable Finance Geneva, and of course, the network of impact hubs here in Switzerland. We also advocate for Switzerland as an impact investing hub, and we aim to further facilitate collaboration and lobbying the federal government in Bern, as well as the local governments. What do our membership look like? Of course, what we want to do is to have a formal space where we can connect, share knowledge and experiences. And the typical members are either suppliers of impact capitals or small and medium-sized, as well as large-scale companies. We even have some multinational enterprises that are members of SIIA, as well as intermediary service providers, market enablers, and policymakers and regulators. And we are present in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, as well as the German-speaking part. And we are at the moment in the process of also engaging with our colleagues in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. And we also have a global outreach, both through global organizations like the Global Steering Group for Impact Investing, as well as our webinar series, which are currently focusing on the Southern Africa member states. So in terms of the upcoming events, the next SIIA event takes place on Wednesday next week, the 1st of December, from 10 o'clock to 11:30 at Impact Hub Geneva, as part of our contribution to and support to the Building Bridges event. And on the same day, we have a joint event with the Sustainable Finance Geneva from 12:30 to 2 o'clock, where an announcement will be made regarding our collaboration moving forward. And the next event after the Building Bridges will be focusing on the role of pension funds within the impact investing space. And these are some of the other events that we are planning. But we are also open to suggestions from our members, of course. And just to finalize, this is what our event on Wednesday looks like. It's within the category supply and demand mismatch. The event will feature a panel followed by an interactive discussion with an audience on various levers available to mainstream this impact investing approach. Becoming a member of the Swiss Impact Investing Association, it's 1,000 Swiss francs for our corporate members and 250 Swiss francs for individuals and non-for-profit organizations. And that's all. I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. And for those of you, we had more than 50 people signing up for the event. Not everyone was with us live, but you will have an opportunity to watch the recording of this conversation at the SIIA YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. So thanks a lot. Wishing you all a wonderful evening and hope to see some of you at the Building Bridges event next week.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Wim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you
Yeah.
next time. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.